FRT stuff, it's hitting fine. Alright, sweet. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the DNT Optics TNC335R, which is a step up from their base model and adds more than a few quality of life improvements over the base model as well. Now, generally speaking, I'm going to get questions like this when people bring up optics, especially dedicated rifle optics, and that would be, well, what's better, a dedicated night vision optic or a dedicated thermal optic? And in this particular case, I don't really have to answer that question because both are included in the same package, as well as the ability to go over to straight daylight. And all of this is in one package that, for what it is fairly compact, honestly. And under a lot of different sets of circumstances, especially if you have moonlight to help you, you can use thermal to detect images while using night vision to get much better details on a particular target that you're looking at. And even if you don't have a ton of illumination to use, this also has a pretty solid IR illuminator that helps you pick out the details that you need. In addition to the fact that, well, you actually can use both at the same time because you do have a picture-in-picture mode that you can switch between without really any effort at all. And there are quite a few people that think that optics like this are made for fairly short-range environments, when honestly that's just straight up not the case, especially when you do what these guys did and add a huge ballistic calculator database that allows you to input your ballistic code into the optic itself, as well as utilizing convenient things like laser rangefinders. And either you can go through the optic or the app that they've developed. Regardless, you can still input one of the 8,000 different listings of bullet data that they have within said database. For the hunter crowd, you have something like recoil activated recording, and for those of you that are like me, that are the types that have had to, in a professional capacity, observe areas for long periods of time, just being able to push button record something and just sit there for quite a while, you can recover whatever it is that you're trying to film either way. And while the starting price for something like this is about $1,000 over the $225, there's enough resolution improvement and little quality of life adjustments that more or less, at least for what you're getting, and with a starting price of around $2,000, which is $1,000 over the $225, there's enough resolution improvement as well as quality of life improvements that, at least to me, for a package like this, make it more or less worth it, especially if you're the type that values details when you're making your observations. So with an on-the-label feature set like this, the next question is generally, well, how does it actually work in practice? Does it handle weather good? Does it handle recoil impulse good, especially heavier round counts or heavier volume? How does all of that exactly work? Well, the cool part is that we're going to get into that right now. Now, I view videos like this as actually pretty important because if you're going to do anything like this, you really do have to get into night optics, and you really do have to get into both night vision and thermal. It's also the first and finest way, as far as YouTube is concerned, to make essentially a logistically unsustainable call if you're going to start talking about night vision a whole lot. Now, I like DNT, I like what they're doing, I like the quality of their products, and I like the simple fact that it's just being made more affordable in general, which is why I'm grateful for the fact that they decided that they were going to sponsor this video and provide the optics. So, per tradition for this sort of thing, this is a product demo. This is not a full review. A full long-term review will be done that is disconnected from DNT in the future. But I will say that first and foremost, I'm a big fan of stuff that works and stuff that works really good. So if you want to learn more about them, you can check out the card that is right up here that links to their YouTube channel, and then they can help you out as far as product selection and all that other stuff. Suffice to say, I can't link directly to their website, but their channel is another deal. But that said, having had the opportunity to sit and play with their optic for a bit, let's go ahead and take a look at what we actually have here. So when we look at the front end of this thing, there are a whole lot of lenses. Up top, you have a digital day and night vision optic that when you go to it as far as modes go, we start at 5 power and we can go up to 20. And as per the norm for this sort of thing, zooming into max power on a digital optic like this, which is more or less a camera, will lose you some definition. But thankfully, it doesn't lose you a ton, especially during the day or at night when you're able to illuminate things with the onboard illuminator. Underneath it, we have the thermal optic, which starts at 2.5 power and can crank up to 10, which starting at 2.5 power is something that I honestly prefer because you really do want the huge wide field of view if the name of the game is detection. As previously stated, there is an IR illuminator on board, and thankfully it's quite robust in that I can effectively IR illuminate from a pretty decent distance away, which more or less shoots to shit the argument that optics like this are only rated for closer range stuff. Now, on the range that I presently live on, I don't have 600 or 1,000 yards or meters to work with, but fortunately there's enough videos that are out there of guys doing exactly this with little difficulty, especially with the provided ballistic calculator that gives you a pretty damn accurate approximate holdover once you've laser range found whatever it is that you're trying to punch a hole in. And of course, as far as both optics that are working in tandem with each other, they're pretty easy to focus and get a fairly clear picture on. And by fairly clear picture, I mean 1080-60. And by 1080-60, I mean 1920 by 1080-60. So as far as refresh rate and clarity of the individual objects that you're looking at, you're not going to run into many problems. And the thing is that even the footage that I have that is heavily compressed by YouTube, the quality that you get through YouTube is still pretty alright, and in real life, with your eyes actually looking through the optics, the image clarity is very much there. I can pick out the details and the contrast that I need regardless of what it is that I'm trying to do that day. Because whether it's night vision or thermal, there are sets of circumstances where either will start to struggle quite a bit. For instance, the particular night that we actually filmed this, it was very overcast and it was raining on and off. To include, at one point, it was raining hard enough to where it was starting to get picked up pretty heavily by the onboard mic when I was recording footage within the optic itself. So when it is truly dark like this, the night vision is going to struggle a little bit unless you break out the illuminator. But if you can't break out the illuminator, you have the option to go over to, frankly, a pretty clear thermal unit. And if I was saddled with just that, I could pick out an enormous amount of detail just from that all by itself. And since I mentioned zoom, it's worth it to note also that there's actually a traditional throw lever that's used for this. Now, don't let that fool you. A throw lever on a digital optic is not going to adjust like a traditional tube optic. All this really is an easier way for my lizard brain to know what's going on when I'm sitting here trying to fondle stuff in the dark. But I do honestly like its inclusion. Push button zooms never really jive great with my brain, especially if I got gloved hands. And while the concept of a wheel zoom makes perfect sense in my brain, in practice, I still manage to screw this up with my dumb guy hands. So having a throw lever that says, "Here, idiot, you can work this," a little bit easier now because your little lizard brain is used to things like this, does exactly that, and it's a little bit easier for me to manipulate simply because the muscle memory is there and I'm used to this motion anyway. So that works for me. In addition to this, we got a pair of large rechargeable batteries that it comes with, and DNT says that you can get up to 6 hours of continuous runtime. And I have no idea if this is the case because being outside with it for quite a bit and constantly putting it back into standby mode extended the runtime quite a bit. So at least I can say at absolute minimum, the 2 batteries that it comes with will get you through the night, and that's only if you're forced to make it run the entire time because, you know, 6 times 2. Thing is too, and this is something that was rather peculiar to me from the instant that I picked it up and started manipulating it, is that something that has this many features and this many options and this many sub-menus that you can go into, a lot of times can have a really not natural user interface, and I'm pretty glad that this one is, in fact, pretty usable because the only real details that I had to look up were some minor things about specific modes and zeroing practices for it. And by that, I mean, for instance, when you go to zero the thing, you need to zero both optics, the digital and the thermal. They are not slaved together, and as far as that individual practice is concerned, because of the physical location of the devices, you can't use the same zero for both. Fortunately, though, you can freeze frame just like you would for dedicating a zero for one of these and more or less match up your reticles in a pinch, so even if you can't be perfectly precise, you can get really close to perfectly precise without firing around if you've already zeroed one of these to start. For instance, once the digital optic is zeroed, you can just zero the other one based off of its present zero if you freeze frame it, and then move the thermal over based off of the position of the digital reticle, which is one of the many reasons to justify this thing's picture-in-picture mode, which is honestly incredibly useful. And so when you look at the 7 buttons that are on board, some guys could get intimidated by this, but once you start fondling things, it's actually quite intuitive on what means what. So for instance, on the left-hand side, you have the 2 large black buttons that do in fact mean 2 separate things. The front one is your laser rangefinder, and if you've already got some ballistic data plugged in, it will give you a hold for a given distance that it reads. Cool part though is that once you turn it on, you can actually keep it on for a little bit to more or less make sure that the range that you've got is actually accurate, because as the world tilts and if you start backing up far enough, you could get a weird reading based off the angle that that particular disc covers on that target, that particular range. And sometimes it can be really off, so just having the ability to keep it on for a little bit and more or less get a confirmation read versus a simple click on, click off type shoot, and having to do that a bunch of times is pretty important, at least to me. The button behind it is the camera mode for the most part, right? And this switches between the primary mode that you see. So if you want the thermal, great. If you want the digital, great. And the cool thing is that if you put the picture-in-picture mode on, it will switch between the primary and the picture-in-picture display. On the 5-button arrangement, up top is your normal power button. Press hold, thing turns on, you're good. If you tap it after it turns on, it goes into a standby mode. And in the options list, you can also find an auto standby mode because there is another sensor that is actually facing in your direction. This thing reads whether or not your face is physically present, or more or less that something is registered behind the optic itself, and then it will take the optic out of standby mode and get your normal display with not a whole lot of lag time. And then of course, once your face comes off the optic, it will immediately go into a standby mode. Now, me personally, I wasn't totally reliant on it. I could see its utility for sure, but as far as not hunting application, I'd rather press on and press off because I don't want like gear and things like that to get too close to the sensor and randomly give me signature issues. But that said, the option is there. And then underneath it, you have a quartet of buttons. The one up top is your settings button. Quickly tapping that gives you different reticle colors, which helps out for contrast regardless of mode that you're in, and holding it down brings up your settings menu that you can navigate quite easily. Whereas selecting an option is as simple as pressing the picture-in-picture button, which is to the right, and backing out of something or the settings menu entirely is the button on the left. Seems pretty simple. Now, the button to the left of that is actually a little bit more complex, and it has a few more functions based off of what you tap or what you hold. And basically all of these buttons do this, to where there's a tap function and there's a hold function. So this guy on the left, if you're in, for instance, your digital mode, holding it will change between digital day and digital night vision. Once you're in night vision, tapping it will actually activate your illuminator at various brightnesses, to include an option for auto illumination or just off altogether. When in thermal mode, simply tapping on this will actually change between different thermal displays. For instance, white hot, black hot, red hot, iron hot, the usual. The bottom button is your recording button. Now, an update to their firmware was done to where you don't have to press and hold to start recording. You can just tap on that guy and it starts recording. And of course, there's a recoil activated function that you can utilize. Me personally, I just want to press on and press off. So simply tap it, it starts recording, it stops when you press the thing again. And the button on the right is your picture-in-picture mode, although it has a tap function as well. And that tap function actually increases or decreases the brightness of the image that you presently see, which has obvious benefits, but holding it will give you the picture-in-picture based off of what the alternate mode is. So for instance, if you're in digital mode and you press and hold this button, it will bring up the picture-in-picture for your thermal mode in a smaller window that you can select. I picked just 12 o'clock personally. The default was not something that I needed to change, but if you start looking this up, you can see that a lot of guys put it in the top right. Me personally, I had no problems with it whatsoever because I could just quick reference at 12 o'clock, and unless I'm at a super weird angle and the target's a little bit closer, like you actually do see in some of this footage, I don't have to do any crazy underholds, and even still, underholds to get solid hits are never that extreme in the first place to where a 12 o'clock picture-in-picture would screw me up. And on the right here, we have a USB cable that you can use to plug into either an alternate power source that can keep all your stuff running, although that doesn't charge the optic, or as a method to pull data off of it. And speaking of that, you can also hook it up via Wi-Fi to your phone as well, so you can just straight up download stuff from the optic wirelessly. So that is a whole lot of stuff wrapped up into this, and that does require a little bit of education on your part, like honestly a lot of night gear does. But the cool thing is that the education phase of this is not incredibly dense. There is not a ton of memorization that is absolutely required of you, and the layout of the controls is frankly intuitive enough to where if you've had any experience at this whatsoever, and frankly I have quite a bit, it's pretty easy to navigate without much manual reading really at all. And so yeah, it has a ton of features in it. How does it actually work in practice? Well, the cool thing is that I have answers for that, as well as the answer to a question that basically nobody asked, but then I'm glad I know all the same, so we'll get into that right now. Well, I had a few questions that needed to be answered when I was taking a look at this in the first place, which would dictate whether or not I was going to do an extended review on it and take it into the field with my troops and all that other stuff. And I needed a solid answer for all of this, and they needed to all be in the affirmative for me to legitimately take this thing seriously. And the first one is, if it was truly dark outside, how much does this night vision struggle? Because generally speaking, digital night vision is just not the same or as effective as white phos. And the answer is, unassisted, it does struggle. And if you are in a no signature environment, you are more or less dependent on the thermal. That said, that seems to be the case for basically everybody when we're talking about optics packages that don't weigh 2 million pounds and take up an entire SR25. So it's more or less on par with this. And if you're not talking about a tactical environment, this is a point that I don't need to make even at all, because it does come with a legit illuminator. The thing works very well, and you can go from not being able to see at all to picking out small details without any effort whatsoever. So even if you're in a tactical environment, if you are finding yourself within a non-peer type environment, which frankly that exists all over the place too, this is just something that you have in your back pocket. And here's the other thing about this too. If you arrive in an area and you begin to observe it, and it's a low threat environment, you can use this in the dark, plus your laser rangefinder, to properly mark things like range cards, so that your references are things that you don't have to be overly exhausted by if you're dependent on something like a thermal. It's just the way that things have been done for a while. The next is, when I hear picture-in-picture, I also hear that I'm about to be really annoyed by user interface, and this is just not the case here. The next is that, is the detail where it needs to be, and is the refresh rate where it needs to be? And I can confidently say yes. You can see in the footage itself that even in an environment that's pretty dark, and even through YouTube's compression of files, you can see that the detail I've got on what it is that I'm observing is fairly clean. And while we're talking about this, the next thing that I have got to have answered before I take anything seriously is, can it handle adverse conditions? Because I seem to attract it. And in this particular case, I've had no issues with it at all while I'm sitting out there in rain, climbing up on top of friggin' Connex containers, sliding my gun over and through friggin' soaked surfaces. None of that stuff was a problem at all. So good, the weatherproofing is there. And of course, the next thing that I have to have answered, at least for me, is that, well, if it's time to get it done, can it handle a bunch of recoil? And what a bunch of recoil means to me is that if I have good observation on an area, and if I have the capability to turn whatever I've got going on into an IAR, I'm absolutely going to do that, because anyone that knows how to handle both, especially if you have optics that can hang in, it essentially instantly means that I can control entire area without having much issues, especially if I'm hitting what it is that I'm friggin' shooting at. So with the addition to an FRT, the question that nobody asked is, well, can it handle rates of fire like this? And the answer is yes, because after I've done a bunch of that stuff with it, the first thing that I went to go check afterwards was semi-auto fire. At 100, I'm zeroed and cured for 200, which means at 100, the impact is going to be a little bit higher than my point of aim. So of course, that's the first thing that I went to go check is, A, is this hold exactly where I need it to be? Because if it's off, then it sort of defeats the purpose of the entire thing, at least to me. And I recognize that, well, to me, it doesn't mean that much to lots of folks, because there's a lot of guys that are using this to shoot pigs with and whatever. And I'm happy to say that it was completely unaffected by that whatsoever. Before, during, after, even with the weather, none of that really mattered at all. It just did exactly what it was supposed to do, and that is, with a zeroed optic, I'm hitting what I'm friggin' shooting at, and the only time I don't is when I make a mistake. So great, in practice, it does as it was designed to do. Good deal. Now, how will it handle this sort of use over long periods? I have no friggin' idea yet, and you're gonna find out with me at some point. But based off of my previous history with DNT in the first place, what I will say is that if you're on the fence about checking them out, honestly, I would go give them a look. Again, check out their YouTube channel. There's a lot of stuff that they've got and a lot of options for a lot of different people with varying budgets. But at least as far as I'm concerned, they're worth taking a look at for quite some time. And so there we go. I'm going to mount this thing up to a bunch of different things over a period of time to see how it handles that. I'm going to see how it handles living outside with a whole bunch of dudes for a whole bunch of time. I'm going to see how it handles the various different weather patterns that we're about to live through. For something like this isn't just like a round count thing too. It's over a period of time. Because realistically speaking, the vast majority of what it is that you're doing with optics like this is observation, not shooting stuff. So you will see this again. It'll just be a little bit before you do. But there again, that's how things like that go. There's the initial video, and then there's the long-term video, so I guess we'll see what happens there. But that said, if you'd like to come out and train with us, you can absolutely do that. We have classes planned out all the way through December in various places like Pennsylvania and Huntsville, Ohio, so you can check that stuff out if you want to. We're also beginning to add a whole bunch of classes to the calendar as well, and we'll definitely have a whole new set of listings right before Black Friday, because that's how that goes. If you'd like to support us through Patreon, you can absolutely do that. Link for that and all of this stuff is in the description below, and if you'd like to get something out of that, $41 a month will get you as much open enrollment training as you would like, provided a couple of exceptions, like for instance a private class that you can arrange with us for fairly obvious reasons, and logistically challenging classes. If you don't want to do that, you can whip a super thanks at us, or participate in the once a month streams that we do, where you can throw super chats at us there. Plus, when you do that there, I also acknowledge those comments about immediately, or as close to immediately as I can, and they're not just comments, they can be questions or whatever. In addition to this, if you want to see some Turbo Nerd stuff, I have gaming channel content, because I'm a dork, and if you want to check that out, the link to that channel is in the description below. In addition, also to this, I'm getting ready to start posting stuff on Rumble. It's like a brand new thing for me, and all it really is just a place where I can throw stuff onto an alternate site. A, just in case, and B, for those of you that would rather view stuff there, the option is now open, and I will start to upload a whole lot from my back catalog over time. Also, if you are a school teacher or a school resource officer, and if you'd like to contact us with some proof of credential, I train you guys for free forever. And for some reason, when I mention this and people want to take advantage of it, they feel bad about it, and if you do feel bad about it, drag a friend of yours out too. You know he needs the training anyway. But that said, all the plugs are plugged. Check out DNT Optics. Thank you, DNT Optics, for sponsoring the video. And remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Easy.